Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Nete Goz. I'm the chairperson of the Threatened Species Conservancy Board, and I will be hosting today's webinar. I'd just like to start by acknowledging that today we are meeting on Aboriginal land. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands, seas, and skies on which we all live, enjoy, and we work to protect. And I extend my respects to elders past and present. I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us in this webinar today. I'm dialing in from Muwinina country down in Lutruwita in Tasmania. I'd love to hear what land you're joining us from, so feel free to drop in which country you're dialing in from in our webinar chat today. Today, we are also going to be talking about why, despite years of effort and investment in Australia, extinction isn't slowing. Australia has never seen more land under protection with a focus on landscape conservation, and yet species continue to decline at an alarming rate. This disconnect is highlighting a critical gap that landscapes alone do not recover species. The Threatened Species Conservancy was founded to address this challenge, delivering targeted species-focused recovery alongside broader landscape action. In this webinar today, we are going to explore why integrating both approaches is essential and how the Threatened Species Conservancy is working to implement coordinated national programs for species recovery across Australia and its islands. Coordinating nationally, acting locally, across landscapes, beyond fences, so no species is left behind. We have several speakers today to talk about this topic. First will be our founder and CEO, Abby Smith. Abby is a fauna ecologist with more than 25 years' experience in threatened species recovery, wildlife management, and conservation leadership. She is also an active leader in the environmental sector, serving in national and state leadership roles, including on the National Australians Island Alliance, as well as being the Deputy Chair for Landcare Victoria. Today, Abby is going to introduce the Threatened Species Conservancy, provide a snapshot of threatened species conservation in Australia, and dig into what's missing from current actions, species-focused recovery. After Abby, our threatened flora ecologist, Dr. Stan Vajicek, will introduce one of our current priority projects. Stan is a botanist and pollination ecologist. He is passionate about protecting and restoring native flora alongside their ecological interactions. Stan's expertise is in flora and fauna surveys, plant reproduction, and population genetics. Stan is taking us into a deep dive into the Southern Shepherd's purse, Valentina insipida. This will be a case study to demonstrate how the Threatened Species Conservancy model is effective for recovery of threatened species. Joining Stan will be Mads Dwyer, who is a botanist and fire ecologist working in conservation and ecological restoration. Mads will share our project working with the small ant blue butterfly. Abby will then finish off our presentation introducing some of the other species we work on that demonstrate how we effectively operate across jurisdictions, land tenures, and community groups. She'll also touch on our plans for the future and how you can get involved. Speaking of getting involved, we'll then open the floor for questions, and I really encourage you all to help us get a conversation going. During the presentation and question time, feel free to drop in any questions to the webinar chat, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. We'll also have a few of our other ecologists online today who you may hear from during question time. Over to you, Abby.
Thanks, Netta. So, hi everyone, I'm Abby. I'm excited to talk to you all today about the Threatened Species Conservancy, which is the only national non-government organisation dedicated exclusively to the recovery of Australia's threatened species across their range. We prioritise the non-iconic and often overlooked species that are critical to ecosystem health. We undertake species-focused work across land tenures and work across a species range, bringing diverse partners together to drive meaningful and enduring outcomes. We're a team of highly skilled threatened species ecologists, botanists, and technical experts. We are governed by a highly skilled national board with expertise in science, policy, governance law, fundraising, and not-for-profit leadership. Our internal team brings together a wide range of technical expert skills across ecology, botany, genetics, project management, detection dogs, seed science, education, ecological monitoring, wildlife, translocations, and stakeholder engagement. Our staff deliver both technical excellence and strong community outcomes, and we're uniquely positioned to develop and implement a national threatened species recovery program across Australia and its islands. We are uniquely positioned to coordinate and implement national action across jurisdictions and fill gaps in recovery through targeted projects. We partner with traditional owners, landholders, land managers, NGOs, and governments, and we are uniquely positioned to scale successful models nationally. The Threatened Species Conservancy was founded in 2018 in response to a growing gap in Australia's conservation approach. At the time, there was a clear and well-intentioned policy shift toward landscape scale conservation, protecting and managing large areas of habitat, restoring ecosystems, and increasing the extent of protected land. While this shift delivered important gains, it has also had an unintended consequence. As the focus moved toward landscapes, targeted species-specific recovery actions began to receive less attention and coordination. Yet many threatened species, particularly those with highly specialised habitat needs, small populations or acute threats, do not recover through landscape scale management alone. Recognising this gap, we established the Threatened Species Conservancy with a clear purpose: to ensure that species themselves are not lost within broader conservation strategies. The organisation was built to deliver focused, coordinated recovery actions at the scale required by each species, while working alongside and strengthening landscape scale efforts. From the outset, we have taken a national collaborative approach, bringing together governments, NGOs, landholders, researchers, and communities to work across tenures, jurisdictions, and landscapes. This enables conservation action to be aligned with the full range of a species, rather than constrained by boundaries such as property lines, park borders, or state jurisdictions. Today, the Threatened Species Conservancy is advancing a vision of a coordinated national recovery program that integrates species-focused action with landscape-scale conservation, coordinating nationally, acting locally, across landscapes, beyond fences, so no species is left behind. This webinar builds on that foundation, examining where current approaches are falling short and outlining a practical pathway to halt and reverse species decline through strategic species-led action. Our vision is to see threatened species recovering and thriving across Australia and its islands through coordinated, collaborative, species-focused conservation. Our mission is to deliver and enable strategic recovery action by bringing together stakeholders to work collaboratively across entire species ranges. And our purpose is simple but ambitious: to ensure that no species is left behind because of fragmented systems, jurisdictional boundaries, or lack of coordination. A core part of our philosophy is that species recovery must operate at the scale of the species itself, not the scale of a park boundary, a property fence, or a state border. Species do not recognise those lines, so conservation action cannot afford to be constrained by them either. That is why our model focuses on coordinating nationally while acting locally, working across landscapes beyond the fences and across jurisdictions to align effort where it matters most. Ultimately, we exist to build a truly national threatened species recovery system, one that complements the landscape scale conservation while ensuring targeted species recovery actions are not overlooked and no species is left behind. The Threatened Species Conservancy aims to deliver a national threatened species recovery program where we coordinate a strategic national scale program to prevent extinction and improve the conservation status of some of Australia's most threatened species. We hope to provide national coordination across species recovery programs by building a national threatened species information hub and driving collaboration across sectors. We aim to develop best practice by creating national recovery planning standards, building an open access best practice library, and embedding traditional owner knowledge with contemporary science and adaptive management. Let's talk about threatened species conservation currently in Australia, because right now, Australia is losing species at an alarming rate, despite decades of conservation effort, despite more protected land than ever before, despite investment. We now have over 2,000 federally listed threatened species in this country and thousands more on state and territory lists. Investment is not translating into outcomes. Australia's current biodiversity funding sits at approximately $400 million a year. We are only spending around $50 million of that on direct threatened species action. The focus is largely landscape scale action, and the outcome is continued species decline. Our native species and ecosystems are foundational to our cultural identity, economic health, and ecological integrity. Plants, insects, fungi, and invertebrates are being lost alongside charismatic birds and mammals. Many of these species are foundational to healthy ecosystems, supporting food webs, pollination, soil health, and water cycles. Australia is home to one of the most unique and diverse natural environments on Earth, yet Australia has one of the highest rates of biodiversity loss globally. Despite years of effort, extinction rates remain high, and the underlying issues are clear. Weak national coordination, inconsistent investment and short-term projects, poor data sharing and fragmented recovery planning, underinvestment in overlooked taxa like invertebrates and plants, limited inclusion of traditional owners and local communities, investment that is being offset by damaging subsidies that are driving biodiversity decline, and a focus on a landscape scale actions at the expense of species-focused action. But it is time for a national renaissance in threatened species conservation. So what Australia needs is some long-term science-led investment in threatened species recovery, a unified national agenda and consistent leadership that is not subject to changing government priorities, strong partnerships across sectors and communities, recognition that species recovery underpins ecosystem cultural and social health and is just as important as managing landscapes and protecting land. To deliver a national threatened species recovery program across Australia and its islands, we need to increase government spending on biodiversity. As a nation, we currently spend less than 0.1% of the federal budget on biodiversity when we need to be spending 1%. If we want to meet our 30 by 30 targets that we've committed to under the Global Biodiversity Framework, which means as a nation, we need to be spending around 6 to 7 billion on biodiversity conservation. We're only spending millions rather than billions. A national threatened species program has been costed at 1.6 billion a year. And I know that that sounds like a lot, but for perspective, Australians spend around 20 to 30 billion dollars a year on pet care, and we spend around 8 billion dollars a year on coffee. Could we all go back to the old international roast maybe to save our threatened species? Australia is spending billions on what we value, but less than 1/10 of what's needed to stop extinctions. The gap isn't ecological, it's strategic. And the barrier is not affordability, it is prioritisation and coordination. Australia is investing in conservation while simultaneously subsidising activities that continue to drive biodiversity decline. Billions of dollars each year support sectors such as fossil fuels, mining, and other environmentally damaging industries, far outweighing direct investment in threatened species recovery. This creates a major contradiction in our national approach to conservation. While we attempt to restore habitats and recover species, many of the key drivers of decline, including habitat loss, fragmentation, and climate impacts, continue to be supported through broader economic policy settings. Conservation investment alone cannot offset these pressures indefinitely. To achieve meaningful species recovery, Australia needs investment in biodiversity, better alignment between environmental goals and economic decision-making, and more focus on species-specific action. Most of the Threatened Species Conservancy's funding currently comes from grants, so we are looking at diversifying income streams to reduce reliance on shifting government priorities and short-term funding cycles. Expanding revenue sources strengthens long-term stability and supports sustained threatened species recovery effort. We're looking to increase our major donors, corporate partnerships, and our strategic collaborations. We also have a fee-for-service arm where any profits go directly back into our threatened species recovery work on the ground. A diversified funding model will enable a more agile, independent, and long-term conservation action. Now let's talk about the missing piece here. Species need species-focused action. Landscape scale conservation is one of the most important advances in modern environmental management. Protecting and restoring ecosystems at broad scales improves habitat connectivity, supports ecological processes, builds resilience to climate change, and benefits many species simultaneously. Without healthy landscapes, long-term biodiversity recovery is impossible. However, while landscape scale conservation creates the foundation for recovery, it does not automatically recover threatened species. Many species continue to decline even within protected areas and well-managed landscapes because the specific factors driving their decline are often highly targeted, localized, or biologically complex. Threatened species frequently persist as small, fragmented populations with very specific ecological requirements. Some depend on particular fire regimes, breeding sites, host plants, hollow-bearing trees, prey species, or microhabitats that are not restored simply through broad habitat protection. Others are impacted by highly specific threats such as invasive predators, disease, hybridization, altered hydrology, or competition from introduced species. In many cases, these pressures continue even inside national parks and conservation reserves. This is why species-focused recovery action is essential. Species recovery requires understanding the biology, ecology, threats, and population dynamics of individual species, and then implementing targeted interventions designed specifically for those needs. For many threatened species, recovery depends on intensive management actions, such as predator or invasive species control around breeding sites, captive breeding and translocation programs, supplementary feeding and nest protection, genetic rescue or population reinforcement, carefully designed fire or grazing management, monitoring of population trends and breeding success, rapid response to emerging threats or catastrophic events. These actions are often highly technical, ongoing, and resource intensive. They also need to occur across the range of a species, which frequently spans multiple land tenures, jurisdictions, and management authorities. Importantly, species recovery is not a short-term process. Many threatened species require decades of coordinated effort before populations stabilise and recover. Short funding cycles and fragmented project delivery are often incompatible with the long-term nature of recovery ecology. This is why a dual approach is needed. Landscape scale conservation provides the ecological foundation, while species-focused recovery provides the targeted intervention necessary to prevent extinctions and rebuild populations. These approaches are not competing priorities. They are complementary and are both essential. Ultimately, if we want to halt and reverse biodiversity decline, conservation must operate not only at the scale of ecosystems and landscapes, but also at the scale of the species themselves. The Threatened Species Conservancy delivers science-driven conservation outcomes across jurisdictions, ecosystems, and land tenures. Headquartered in Cowes, Victoria, we operate nationally and partner with state and federal governments, traditional owners, local communities, and other NGOs. Our unique model focuses on species recovery, requiring deep ecological and logistical expertise for each project. We work across a species range, which is crucial for promoting genetic diversity, increasing resilience, supporting populations, and ultimately increasing the long-term survival prospect of species. We currently lead or support more than 20 active conservation programs, largely focusing on the non-iconic species, the creepy, crawly, slithery, and slimy. Since our inception, we've worked on more than 45 threatened species, collaborated with over 65 partner organisations, and facilitated over 120 community events, including training sessions, citizen science events, school visits, workshops, and volunteer field days. We now lead 3 national recovery teams, reflecting our commitment to long-term ecological impact, transparent coordination, and expert facilitation. We prioritise meaningful community involvement, and our strategic approach is designed to fill key gaps in the recovery of Australia's most at-risk species, particularly those often overlooked or lacking consistent investment. We focus on species actions across the species range because landscapes alone do not recover species. Healthy landscapes support species, but targeted species recovery actions prevent extinctions. We'd like to tell you a bit more about this using some of our projects as case studies. So I will hand you over to Stan and Mads, a couple of our ecologists, to talk about some of our projects in a bit more detail and to show you why threatened species require species-focused action. Today we'll discuss 2 case studies, one of Balantinia antipoda, or southern shepherd's purse, and one of the small ant blue butterfly. Over to you, Stan.
Thanks, Abby. Hello, everyone. So about Balantinia antipoda, this is a tiny annual herb. So Abby, can you please move to the other side? Thank you. It's a tiny annual herb in the Brassicaceae family, and it grows among mosses on granite outcrops at high elevations where there is reliable rainfall in early spring and the water seeps over the rocks so that the plants can grow in these otherwise very hostile habitats. So it's a very specific habitat that it requires. And historic records indicate that this species was once quite abundant and occurred at least at several sites in central Victoria and Tasmania. But then it disappeared and it was presumed extinct until it was rediscovered in the 1980s at Mount Alexander in Bendigo. And since then, it has been in a steady decline and is now listed as critically endangered. Valentina is threatened by invasive weeds and physical damage to the moss mats by feral animals and other disturbance. But climate change is likely also a contributing factor, particularly through increasingly erratic rainfall and unseasonal hot, dry spells in early spring when the plants can die before they complete their life cycle. In recent years, the species has declined quite dramatically. Last spring, we've counted just over 4,000 plants across 3 sites, which for a tiny annual herb is a very small population size. It is possible that we've missed some areas of habitat where Valentina still occurs, but it is clear that the numbers are down and the entire patches have disappeared just in the last decade. And of course, as the populations decline, we expect that they will lose their genetic diversity, which then leads to inbreeding depression and reduced seed and seedling vigor, which then leads to further decline, a scenario known as the extinction vortex. And Valentina is particularly vulnerable because as an annual herb, the plants need to reproduce pretty much every year, as its tiny seed is not likely to stay viable in the soil for a long time. Now, to add insult to injury, much of Mount Alexander has burned in January this year during a catastrophic fire danger day. Lucky, most of the moss mats where we knew Valentina occurred seem to be okay, perhaps just a little singed around the margins. But it's still a bit of a worry because the seed may have been killed by radiant heat. We'll need to wait for spring to know if they come back. And we have seen some secondary impacts after the fire as well. At one site, a large tree fell over right on top of one of the best Valentina patches where last year there were at least 900 plants. So it's quite a lot of work to manage these impacts. So given all this, it is very fortunate that in October last year, we have collected about 600 Valentina seeds from across all known sites. And at the time, we didn't yet have any funding specifically for this species, but we knew that to save it, we'd have to grow the plants ex situ to raise lots of seeds that we could then use to augment the extant populations and for translocation, and to do so without putting strain on the remaining wild populations. Now, this work is currently underway with funding from Saving Native Species Programme and in collaboration with La Trobe University and Parks Victoria. With this funding, we were able to establish the seed orchard and develop a translocation proposal. And we are gearing up to establish a formal recovery team, which will bring together all stakeholders, including traditional owners and local conservation groups. Here I'll hand over to Matt, who will tell you more about our seed orchard and the plans for the translocation. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you. Stan has given us a brilliant introduction to Valentina antiphoda and the threats it faces, as well as our goals for the species recovery into the future. This brings me to our ex situ seed orchard at La Trobe University. We sowed 512 of the seeds collected last year and germinated them out of season in a climate-controlled growth chamber. We had a germination success rate of approximately 25%, and currently we have 100 established plants which are thriving as VIPs in the plant nursery on campus. About 60 of these plants are now flowering and producing fruit. We've moved them outdoors to allow pollinators to visit the flowers and have also hand-pollinated them to ensure outcrossing occurs. As Stan mentioned earlier, one of the main threats to the remaining population of Valentina antiphoda is the immense pressure from invasive weeds. We are trying to manage this by hand weeding around the moss mats where Valentina grows. However, in the long term, we need to find more places where Valentina can thrive. These sites will need to have the appropriate habitat, which is challenging to find, but we think we have at least 2 good sites for translocation, Tallarook State Forest and Mount Cole, which have very similar habitat and not as many weeds. Translocation to these sites has been attempted in the past, but was not successful. We think this could have been due to the low genetic diversity of the seeds that we used. We're hoping that the seeds from our cross-pollinated plants will be more successful. We have already begun collecting seed, and we're very excited that our first round of translocation is set to begin next month. This will be followed by an extensive survey in spring during peak flowering season. And we will also continue growing our seed orchard and collecting seed, which will be used in future translocation rounds and to establish other ex situ populations. This project and the work that is being done for Balantinia antipode would not have been possible without investment into conservation of individual species. It's taken a lot of work. It's needed strong, committed leadership and expertise to plan, coordinate, and oversee the project. The species focus was essential here because of intractable threats that Balantinia antipode faces. Some of these threats, such as wildfires and climate change, are impossible to prevent. Without action, the wild populations of Balantinia antipode would face an extinction vortex, and so the species really needs continued targeted work to recover. Another project that the team has been working on is the conservation of the small ant blue butterfly, Acrodipsis myrmecophylla. This species was once recorded across multiple locations in Victoria, but had not been seen for almost 30 years. Due to the lack of confirmed records and ongoing habitat decline, the species was feared to be extinct in the state. Like many butterflies, the small ant blue has an extraordinarily specialized life cycle, relying on coconut ants of the genus Papyrus and specific landscape attributes to complete its development. This dependence makes the species highly vulnerable to habitat fragmentation, altered fire regimes, invasive weeds, and disturbance to ant colonies. Recognising the urgent need for targeted action, the Threatened Species Conservancy undertook extensive statewide surveys using a specially designed methodology developed for detecting both the butterfly and its host ants. These surveys involve targeted searches of historical records and potential habitat across Victoria. This extensive species-focused approach led to a major breakthrough, the discovery of a surviving breeding population in central Victoria, the only remaining population in the state. The rediscovery confirmed that the species still persists in Victoria, but also highlighted how close it is to extinction and the urgent need for coordinated recovery action. The small ant blue butterfly is a powerful example of why broad landscape conservation alone cannot recover all threatened species. Even where habitat remains, this butterfly survives only where coconut ant colonies occur and where very specific microhabit conditions persist. They have a symbiotic relationship with coconut ants, so to protect the small ant blue butterfly, you must protect the coconut ants. This means recovery requires species-focused action, targeted surveys, monitoring, ecological research, and direct intervention. Otherwise, species can quietly disappear from otherwise intact landscapes. The remaining butterfly populations occur across fragmented landscapes managed by different agencies, councils, community groups, and traditional owners. Species recovery therefore requires coordination beyond individual reserves or land tenures. We need to work across the full ecological range of the species to identify surviving populations, reconnect habitat, and reduce extinction risk from single catastrophic events like fire. This project demonstrates that threatened species recovery is highly technical and threat-specific. The same management approach cannot be simply applied everywhere. Effective recovery depends on understanding the ecology of the species and tailoring actions. No single organisation can recover threatened species alone. The small ant blue butterfly project relies on partnerships between traditional owners, scientists, land managers, volunteers, and local communities. The collaborative model allows recovery work to occur across landscapes and over long timeframes while building local stewardship and shared ownership of conservation outcomes. Since we've been working to protect the small ant blue, we've achieved several milestones. The species has been rediscovered and its caterpillar seen for the first time in decades. We've completed extensive surveys, trialled detection dogs, and have established baseline monitoring and a recovery strategy which guides long-term action. These outcomes only occurred because dedicated species-focused recovery work was undertaken. Without targeted surveys and specialist ecological knowledge, these butterflies may have been assumed extinct in Victoria. This project demonstrates that intensive species recovery programs can deliver real conservation outcomes and provide a pathway away from extinction. I'm now passing back to Abby to give you a quick snapshot of some of our other projects.
Thanks, Mads. Thanks, Dan. So I was just going to talk quickly and highlight a couple of our other projects that you can see up on the side here. So these projects demonstrate our unique ability to bring stakeholders together and work across jurisdictions and focus on the technical elements of threatened species recovery. Now, the first one up here, which is one of my favourites and very close to my heart, is the Norfolk Island Green Parrot, where we've been able to partner with the various land managers on Norfolk Island, the Norfolk Island National Park and the Norfolk Island Regional Council, to complete the first ever island-wide census a few years ago. We've been able to do this because we can work across jurisdictions and bring those partners together. The next species is Harrow Wattle, where we've been able to work across public, private and Indigenous managed lands to reintroduce the species into goat exclosures in the Mallee, protecting and increasing the population. Next is the pink-tailed worm lizard, where in partnership with Deakin University, we have been able to develop techniques for surveying using eDNA, which limits the destructive rock rolling methods that have previously been used for this species. So we've also established a recovery team that ensures communication between agencies working across the species range. The next one is the Black Gum Project, and you can see one of our ecologists, Mitch, who's about to do a plant out of a bunch of black gum across private land. This project has worked across land tenures to establish a framework for conservation activities, outlining the highest priority areas where we should be focusing our efforts and protecting and re-establishing plants in those spots. The framework will be made available to all stakeholders, including private landholders, the CMA, Council, DECA, and Landcare to aid in this collaborative effort, so we're all working from the same page. Finally, we have the golden sun moth, which is one of the species that makes up the unique and endangered butterfly community, known as Butterfly Community Number 1. Part of the work we did to assist this species involved removing acacia species that were encroaching on the grassy habitats that the golden sun moth require. So if you'd like to read up on any more detail about these projects or the many more that we work on, head to our website and you can do that. Now, how can you help? I'm sure after hearing all of this, you would all like to help. We're all here today because we all care about threatened species. So to help Australia's threatened species, there's a few different things that you can do. You can volunteer with us, you can donate, or you can partner with us. So volunteers are at the heart of the Threatened Species Conservancy's work. Since our inception, dedicated volunteers have contributed thousands and thousands of hours across diverse roles, from ecological monitoring and field surveys to seed collection, weed control, and citizen science. So head to our website to sign up or to find out more. You can also donate. Every donation made goes towards protecting species on the ground. So please consider signing up as a monthly donor via our website and supporting us and supporting these threatened species. And you can partner with us. We're available to partner on threatened species work in your region. And we also have a fee for service arm where all of our profits go back into threatened species recovery. I want to thank everybody for coming along today. It was really great to have everybody here. This was our first webinar, so we were trying to work through some technical issues, and I think everyone's done a great job. Thank you, team. Thanks everyone for coming, and I'll chuck it back to Netta for question time.
So I understand that some people are having issues accessing the chat function. We're just going to quickly go out of presenter mode so that to try and fix that. But in the meantime, we do have a Q&A function that is working, and I see some questions in there already. So thank you. We'll start with those, and feel free to drop in any other questions in our question and answer. So I might go first to one that's specifically to you, Mads, if that's all right. Someone's asking the date range of the previously known sites on the range map for the butterfly. So those are the blue dots on the range map in East Gippsland. They're just asking what are those date ranges.
I might actually throw this one back to Abby. That part of that project was a little bit before my time. So Abby, would you be able to answer that one a little better?
Sorry, could you just ask the question again, Netta?
Yeah, no problem. So the question is asking the date range of the previously known sites for the blue ant butterfly. So there was some blue dots on a range map in East Gippsland, and they're asking what dates were those previously known sites?
Well, I mean, they're all from different time periods. So they are the locations where we surveyed from historical records. So they're the areas that previously, historically, the small ant blue butterfly has been known to be found, but it has disappeared from all of those locations but one. And so they're our survey sites that you see um, in that map across Victoria.
Thanks, Abby. I might throw this one to Stan, if that's all right, being our threatened flora ecologist. A question is asking whether making threatened Indigenous or local flora more widely available for purchase at garden centres could empower everyday consumers or gardeners to support the recovery of threatened species. Could substituting the purchases of Indigenous species also reduce the proliferation of invasive flora? I'm keen for your thoughts on that one, Stan.
Thanks, Dana, and thank you for this question. Yeah, definitely this is something we should be doing, but also doing carefully. There's certainly a lot of weeds that are still being sold, like Gazania or Agapanthus, that escape from the gardens and become highly invasive weeds and become a massive ecological issue. Stop buying them, please. And it would be great if Bunnings and other major suppliers stopped selling them, because it's just really not responsible. And there's plenty of really wonderful native plants that we could use instead, which would do way better. But also choose plants that are indigenous to your area and not stuff that is from, say, New South Wales or Western Australia, which can also become invasive and planted outside of the range. So especially if you live close to national park or some of the nature reserves, choose plants that are native to your area, and consider, there's always some advice from local NGOs or councils, what are the suitable species, and talk to indigenous plant nurseries. They will be able to advise on what to plant, and in this way, definitely we can make a difference and prevent future ecological problems.
Thanks, Stan.
I have something I might add to that too, which is
Absolutely.
in lots of regions around Australia, there are dedicated Indigenous nurseries. I'm not sure about interstate, but in Victoria, if you go to environment.vic.gov, they do actually have a interactive map that shows you where all the local Indigenous nurseries are. So they would be really great people to get in contact with if you're interested in planting some locally threatened species, so that you know that you're putting them somewhere where they should go. And that they're from a local area, and you're not introducing genetics from a very far distant place that potentially could have undesirable impacts on local populations.
Great call, Mads. Thank you. We've got a question here from Hedley. Thanks for dialing in, Hedley. Abby, I'm going to throw this one to you. Hedley's asking, how do you prioritise what species you focus on?
We get asked this question a lot. And I know that, in government and in well-funded organisations, people spend a lot of time working out how to prioritise which species to work on. We don't really have the luxury of having the funding or the time to do that. And most of our funding, as I said previously, comes from grants. So we're very restricted in how we can prioritise our work. So if a funding body is putting out a grant, they have really restricted idea of what they actually want to fund and what species and what areas that they might put funding in. So we're very restricted, and a lot of our work comes from what other people are prioritising. So it's one of the reasons why we really hope to create a better funding model and diversify our funds and get our donors so that we can grow our funding base and we can start prioritising what is most important to us.
So can I put to you, Abby, if that does happen in a perfect world, you're funded to do the work that you think we should be prioritising, how would you prioritise what species you'd like to focus on, or that you'd like the Threatened Species Conservancy to focus on?
Well, we focus on the non-iconic, the often overlooked species. We spend a lot of our time on invertebrates, reptiles, species that no one's ever heard of before, like the pink-tailed worm lizard or the small ant blue butterfly. So we like to focus on the things that are slipping through the gaps, and that's where we would start.
Great. I'll throw this out to all of our ecologists to ask. Someone wants to know what monitoring strategies are being used. Is eDNA being applied to monitor species distribution?
Stan or Mads, are you happy for me to take that?
Oh yeah, you go. Yeah.
Yeah, look, we do use eDNA in some of our projects. It's really highly, species specific. It doesn't work for every species. We have developed with Deakin University some techniques to use eDNA for pink-tailed worm lizards, but that's still in development as well. So yeah, it's very useful, but it's species specific.
Great. And someone's asking about the hand weeding of the Balantinia sites. It seems very laborious, and as someone who spends most of my weekends weeding, I can relate to this question. Is there an easier way to manage weeds for some of these recovery sites? For instance, could you be spraying herbicides, selective herbicides?
I think
Yeah,
that
thanks
one's
for
for
that.
you, Stan.
Yeah, hand weeding for areas where there's only minor infestations, it's usually Hypocaris glabra or cat ears, which is quite easy to pull out. It does take time, but it's not terribly hard work. So yeah, we've done a little bit of that. And if it's a nice sunny day and the beautiful sights, it's not terribly bad. So that works. But obviously, you can't apply that on a large scale. Lucky for Balantinia, they're tiny and they don't need huge amounts of habitat, so this this is all right. But yes, we are considering that there has to be some way to restore sites that are so degraded that there's definitely not any Balantinia that left. And herbicides that have glyphosate in them, in principle, should get rid of broadleaf herbs and not affect the moss because it's a non-vascular plant. And so you could, in principle, restore the sites and then bring back the native species. So this is something I'm considering as an idea, and yeah, I will work towards a research project, perhaps with a collaboration with a university to see how that could possibly work.
Thanks, Stan. Abby, I might throw another small ant blue butterfly question to you, if that's all right. Someone's asking if we're working with anyone in the ACT in relation to the small ant blue butterfly and the coconut ants. There are some locations in ACT where these are present, and research is urgently needed to protect those sites from development, including industrial development. There's some sites on a nature reserve, the Callum Nature Reserve, and also adjacent privately leased sites that are under threat of development. So here we have different tenures, which seems like our warehouse. Are we currently engaged with that ACT group?
Yeah, we have a project written up for the populations that are in the ACT and have some partnerships developed up there. We have been applying for funding for that work for about 5 years to no avail. So it's one of our priorities, and if we can increase our funding, that's one of the places that we'll be putting funding. At the moment, we're really focusing on the population that we found in Victoria and putting a lot of effort into trying to protect that site.
So how much would it cost to run a project like that? If we are seeking to fund sort of a second area where this species occurs, how much would that cost, and how does that interact with our current project that we are working on?
So, I mean, the project that we're working on, we've probably spent maybe approximately $200,000 to develop up the monitoring techniques and survey basically all of Victoria and locate locate the species and to train up detector dogs to search for coconut ant sites. We have a lot more work still to do in Victoria and not enough money to do it. So a project that would look at trying to recover this species properly and expand where it is found currently in Victoria and in the ACT. I would ballpark it at half $500,000 over 5 years would make a really huge impact to a species like this.
Yeah, so when you look at that in the scope of the overall spending required for biodiversity, I think you get a lot of bang for buck there.
Absolutely.
I'll just put a call out if anyone else has any other questions. We have another couple of minutes left on the webinar, so feel free to drop them into our question and answer box. But thank you to those who have already provided questions, and apologies for the technical difficulties on using the chat function. So while we're just letting the last couple of questions trickle in, Abby, I might just ask you, where to from here? People have attended the webinar. We've obviously specified that, we're always keen for supporters, whether that's projects to partner with or volunteers or donations. If someone wants to get involved, where should they go to from here?
Well, I mean, partners can obviously just send us an email. We are always interested in partnering on threatened species work. So we'd love to talk to anybody, and there are a lot of industry people online today. So we're really keen to connect up and continue this conversation with those people. For non-industry people, you might like to donate or volunteer with the organisation. Getting out on the ground in your area can really help not only your well-being and mental health, but help threatened species as well. So yeah, head to our website for those sorts of things. And I think in the email that people got sent out, there's my email in there, so you can contact me directly if you want to.
Yeah, and it would be remiss of me not to mention, given that we are nearing the end of the financial year, that the Threatened Species Conservancy does have deductible gift recipient status. So any donations made to us over $2 are tax deductible. So while you start to think about wrapping up your year-end finances, and perhaps you're looking at gifting some of those dollars, we would be a very worthy candidate. And as you've seen today, those funds go directly to really important projects on the ground that are often overlooked by some of the by governments and large organisations. So we highly encourage you, if you have any questions about any of the content on today's webinar, or you'd like to reach out, please do email Abby. We'd love to hear from you. I do want to just thank everyone for attending today, and we really appreciate so many people being interested in the work we're doing and also trying to fix this very critical piece of the puzzle. Threatened species focused recovery it still needs a lot of work to do. So we hope that those who are working in this area will be able to see opportunities to partner with us. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. And we hope that this is just the start of a conversation that we can keep going.
Thanks, everybody.